words, sorry, words to this event.
Thank you, Philip. It's also work, but it's pleasure. It's a pleasure as well. Thank you so much for the introduction, ladies and gentlemen. Very great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and to open this 2025 LEAP-RE Stakeholder Forum. This event provides an excellent opportunity to review the impressive achievements of LEAP-RE project to date and also to look ahead to the future, which is now. It's already the future. And it is the exciting area of cooperation between the EU and Africa, which, coming from a directorate which is chasing the clean energy transition and making sure not only that it's happening, but it's increasing in its speed and enabling that to happen everywhere. This takes on a completely different and very interesting dimension. And I'm particularly pleased to be here today as the EU's partnership with Africa is still a key priority for the Commission, including in the context of clean energy transition. Through the Global Gateway Initiative, the EU and Africa are increasingly collaborating. A first milestone of the Global Gateway was the Africa-Europe investment package with approximately 150 billion euros of investment dedicated to strengthening the partnerships with Africa. And as a part of this, the European Union has launched a dedicated investment package, the Africa EU Green Energy Initiative. And this initiative aims to increase the production of electricity and also the access to energy, to promote energy efficiency, to create a conducive regulatory environment for private investments, and to advance market integration. This initiative will provide funding through grants and leverage private investments too. Energy security and affordability are a pillar of the EU-Africa collaboration essential for securing stability and also growth. Just to name a couple of initiatives at the European Union level, which are contributing to this objective or these objectives. In 2022, we published our Repower EU plan to make Europe independent from Russian fossil fuels well before 2030. Reducing dependence on fossil fuels is a common issue, and renewable energy is a shared answer between our two continents. In February of this year, the European Commission unveiled the Affordable Energy Action Plan, a cornerstone of the broader Clean Industrial Deal. This package responds to persistent high energy costs and aims to make energy more affordable, more secure, and more sustainable across the European Union. Achieving these objectives of the new Clean Industrial Deal is closely linked to our ability to act and to be effective on the international stage. Simultaneously, energy security and affordability concerns cannot be separated from sustainability. The clean energy transition remains the common answer to these challenges. Europe is indeed leading in many sectors of the clean energy transition, particularly in energy production and distribution, and digitalization and logistics. Africa, on the other hand, has abundant renewable energy resources to cover its own needs. Joint research collaboration helps to harness Europe and Africa's renewable energy potential and accelerate progress towards a green and circular economy while sharing the lessons of this deployment collectively. Common research actions thus build mutual trust and also, at the same time, creates benefits on both continents. So the African Union EU high-level Policy Dialogue on Science, Technology and Innovation, let me recall that this research cooperation is conducted under this broad umbrella. Since its adoption in 2010, this platform has facilitated regular exchanges on research and innovation policy, aiming to formulate and implement long-term priorities to strengthen Africa-Europe cooperation in these areas. Under this framework, the HLPD, the High-Level Policy Dialogue, that is, first adopted a roadmap in April 2016 for a jointly funded EU research and innovation partnership on food and nutrition, security and sustainable agriculture. In October 2017, a second priority area was formalized through the adoption of a research and innovation partnership on climate change and energy security, the CCSE. In 2018, a third priority on innovation was adopted, aiming to strengthen the role of the private sector and to create jobs as well while improving the business environment. The African Union EU Innovation Agenda adopted in 2023 included 4 objectives with short, medium and long-term actions grouped according to the priority areas of the EU cooperation in research and innovation, public health, the green transition, innovation and technology, and capacities for science in addition to cross-cutting issues. Under this CCSC umbrella, our cooperation with Africa in research and innovation for renewable energy is also picking up the speed. Under the umbrella, this is gaining momentum, and in fact our flagship projects, LEAP-RE, co-funded under Horizon 2020 with a €15 million contribution from the EU and another 15 million from African partners, it has created a thriving community of researchers, entrepreneurs and funding bodies. Since 2020, LEAP-RE has successfully launched 2 joint calls for proposals with African and European funding organizations, resulting in 23 projects, also involving organizations outside the consortium. Under Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, we have had 49 projects in renewable energy with African partners, of which 35 are still running. Notably, 12 of these projects demonstrate renewable energy solutions in situ in Africa. To continue supporting joint funding projects, a new important project, LEAP-C, rather than LEAP-RE, focusing on sustainable energy, started in 2024. This new project brings together 10 European and 12 African funding organizations to finance projects through joint calls, with a total funding capacity of €29 million, with a €10 million from the EC and 19 million from the national bodies. Its first joint call for proposals was launched in January of this year, and projects will be awarded in the coming months. Well, what does the road ahead look like? We promised at the beginning we'll look at the future. It looks like that we need to scale up the lessons learned from the first wave of projects. So today is really a good opportunity to take stock of what the road ahead is, but also what these lessons learned have been. And there I see a priority for scaling up the results and the lessons learned from the first wave of projects. The first wave of projects awarded since 2020 is now coming to completion or have already been successful. The road ahead lies in thinking about how our common research efforts can lead us to scale up our innovation and via these innovations to stimulate growth on both our continents. This aligns with the new objective set by President von der Leyen with the adoption of the Competitiveness Compass and the Startup and Scale-up Strategy. It is crucial to continue working together on how our joint research efforts can materialize in commercial scale projects on both continents. The LEAP-RE Forum thus comes as a crucial moment to discuss these matters. On the 24th of October of this year, right after this event, the next senior officials meeting of the African Union and EU high-level policy dialogue on science, technology and innovation will be taking place, and it aims to provide a clear roadmap and the impetus for the years to come. So now is a moment for you to fire up the ambition for that meeting. So the ball is in your court. I wish you a successful event with the hope of continued collaboration with increasing ambition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Drake. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends. Happy to see some familiar faces. Leonard Lévesque. I am coordinating the long-term European partnership, European-African partnership on renewable energy, LEAP-RE. So thank you for setting the stage and for recalling what we've been achieving. Indeed, since 2020, LEAP-RE has stood as a landmark for the African-European cooperation on energy in terms of research and innovation. So as you said, we've been funding 2 calls within LEAP-RE, 1 call within LEAP-SE. So we need to work a bit on the branding, it's clear, but the ambition is there. And we will have also the pleasure later on today to pre-announce the next call for project to be launched. Thanks to this instrument, we have been funding 242 organizations. So I let you imagine how many people are involved in those organizations and companies, research centers, universities that are beneficiary of our action in more than 33 countries in Europe and Africa. 31 projects, majority of them, they are indeed completed, but still some are ongoing. And this is our fifth event. First time in 21 in Nairobi, 22 in Pretoria, 23 in Kigali, last year in Milano, and today in Brussels. So we are very happy to have you here, especially because now we will enter into a new phase. In 2026, LEAP Energy finds itself at a crucial crossroads, because the question is not whether the initiative has proven its value. I think we already have demonstrated, and we will see later on today that we have a great value. But as you said, Mrs. Drake, it's how to sustain and how to scale these achievements so that they continue to deliver outputs, concrete outputs. We have plenty of results, outcomes, prototypes, demonstrators that are here on the ground and that can purely benefit for both continents. In particular, and we will discuss that during the first session with some speakers, including the French Research Agency or the Algerian Ministry of Higher Education and Research, we implemented this co-funding mechanism that showed that joint investment, aligning on common priorities between different countries is possible between Europe and Africa. So actually we built a network of trust that drove to ownership and efficiency in terms of renewable energy, research and innovation. And this is an important framework for future collaboration. This mechanism, this co-funding mechanism, has generated a strong pipeline of projects and innovation. They have uptake and replication potential. This is something that we will also address during the third session to see how potentially those prototypes, those demonstrators, those research outcomes, they can ultimately access the African energy markets. So I think we also need to protect what is working, what works. And we drove several consultations to our stakeholders, to our beneficiaries, and they have expressed a growing demand for continuity in LEAP-RE's most impactful components that are, for instance, this annual forum. It's the 5th time we meet. There are plenty of familiar faces that we are very happy to see each year. The Renewable Energy School to increase capacity building activities. The online platform where practitioners, researchers can meet up and matchmake in order to apply in collaborative projects, maybe not only within LEAP-RE framework, or also policy roadmaps to capitalize on this joint alignment between member states. So these are not just tools, they are living infrastructures of cooperation. And this is also something that we will maybe get in depth during the second session. So looking ahead, as you said, Mrs. Drake, we need now to ensure that these assets continue to serve the AU-EU cooperation, but also the AU-EU research and innovation communities, and ultimately the end users in Europe and Africa. So it's important to preserve this momentum, coherence, and trust that we have been building. And now the next phase of this collaboration between Europe and Africa on science, technology, and innovation must build on what LEAP-RE has achieved in order to turn short-term project cycles into long-term strategic partnerships. We have some discussions that are already underway on how to ensure continuity with the shared goal of keeping LEAP-RE continuity and active beyond 2026. So the foundations have been laid. The challenge is now to ensure that they support the next generation of joint endeavors between Europe and Africa, where science, policy, and partnership continue to power a more sustainable energy future for Europe and Africa. So these are the main elements that we will also address today, starting with the first panel. So I will give you the floor, Philippe Schild. So you are senior expert in the units responsible for clean energy transition at DGRTD, and I'll let you inviting the other panelists.
Thank you, Leonard. I'd like now to invite in the first session the next speakers, Mrs. Tiniko Noncha. I would say Tiniko.
Yeah, sorry. Just there is a video from our chairman, Abdilatif Zerga, who unfortunately is unavailable to attend on site the meeting, who actually wanted to say a few words. So you can proceed. Thank you.
Distinguished members of the General Assembly, Excellencies, colleagues, and partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And greetings from the Pan-African University Institute for Water and Energy Sciences, including climate change, POES. It's a great honor to join you virtually at this LEAP-RE Forum in Brussels. As board director of POES and president of the LEAP-RE General Assembly, I am truly proud to share some reflections on our collective journey and our vision for the years ahead. LEAP-RE stands today as one of the strongest examples of Africa-Europe cooperation and partnership in science, technology, and innovation. It's science diplomacy in action, linking our universities, research centers, policy makers, and entrepreneurs around a shared purpose, which is advancing renewable and sustainable energy for all. Through joint programming and co-funding, LEAP-RE has already supported 31 projects across both continents, projects that can connect scientific excellence with the social impact. From clean cooking and smart grid to green hydrogen, renewable integration, and sustainable mobility. Each project represents more than innovation. It represents a real bridge between research and communities, between Africa and Europe, between knowledge and opportunity. This year, LEAP-RE launched its investment portfolio, showcasing a diverse range of projects driving Africa's energy transformation. Let me highlight quickly a few of the most inspiring ones. First, RE4AGRI project, Renewable Energy for Agriculture. This initiative connects energy access with food security. It offers data-driven tools to help African governments plan sustainable rural electrification and agricultural productivity. After successful pilots in 5 countries, it will soon expand to 10, supporting more than 300 million people who still lack electricity access. Second, solar charge, mobile solar for clean energy and electric vehicles, developed with Stellenbosch University and eCross Africa. It provides modular mobile charging units that deliver clean, reliable power and support electric mobility. Faster, cheaper, and greener than microgrids, a perfect illustration of the EU's global gateway approach in practice. Third, LED solar-powered water purification. This technology delivers safe drinking water using artificial intelligence optimized UV disinfection, powered entirely by solar energy. For less than 60 euros per unit, is addressed one of Africa's most urgent needs: clean water for more than 400 million people. Fourth, the SHE initiative, Smart Home Energy. In Zambia, this project transformed curb waste into clean cooking fuel, reducing deforestation and household air pollution. With 50,000 efficient stoves ready for deployment, SHE turns agricultural residues into opportunity for heat, livelihoods, and climate. And finally, the Geothermal Atlas for Africa, the first ever continental geothermal mapping tool, unlocking 15 gigawatts of potential clean energy and giving policymakers and investors the data they need to build Africa's geothermal future. All these examples and many others such as Puram, SenSafe, and Leopard demonstrate what LEAP-RE stands for as local innovation, scientific excellence, and shared prosperity. As our progress report 2018 to 2025 makes clear, the next phase, 2026 to 2030, will be very decisive. We are now moving from research to innovation and from laboratories to market. We succeeded to build a real platform for exchange of good practices and for sharing the knowledge. Through the new LEAP Energy Startup Studio and Innovation Lab, we will help transform promising research outcomes into investable ventures. We will connect scientists and entrepreneurs, build fund networks, and open access to capital, so that African innovations can scale sustainably across the continent. This next phase is about local ownership, financial sustainability, and youth employment, the foundations of truly just energy transition. As the heart of LEAP-RE lies a simple but powerful principle: equality. Africa and Europe partners co-fund, co-design, and co-implement together. To date, our national and regional partners have committed more than 12 million euros. Yes, 12 million euros, a clear sign of shared trust and shared responsibility. LEAP-RE aligns closely with EU innovation agenda and support Mission 300, which aims to bring electricity to 300 million Africans by 2030. This is not only a research collaboration, this is a partnership of experts grounded in solidarity and the shared vision of sustainable energy future. My friends and my sisters, LEAP-RE is not just a program, it's a movement for knowledge, cooperation, and transformation. Our success will not be measured by how many projects we fund, but how many lives we change, how many innovations we scale, and how many communities gain access to clean, affordable energy. Together, Africa and Europe are providing that global challenges can only be solved through global partnership. So as we look ahead, let us continue LEAP-SE forward together towards a shared, clean, and resilient energy future. Thank you, colleagues, for listening. And I wish you a very productive and successful event in Brussels.
Thank you for those words. I'd like to invite Tiniko Nentonchagwana. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. She's the Deputy Director of the Africa Multilateral Cooperation at the DSI in South Africa. And François Moisan, who is in fact, the co-lead of implementing joint activities, joint calls in LEAP-RE and LEAP-RE. Please sit down. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we are only the three. And we have the third participant, Mokhtar Salami, who is the Director General of, who is working as the Director General of Scientific Research and Technological Development in Algeria. He is online and listen and will be able also to participate. So these first sessions, we are dealing with, it's called Efficiency and Effectiveness of Joint Programming and Joint Calls. And we are looking and we'll be discussing the lesson learned that we had from joint call activities, which was one of the objectives of LEAP-RE, and how we could move it forward. And we'll have a few questions. So I first will leave the participants, the panelists, to have a few introductory words. So I will leave the floor to you, Tineko. Okay. It's fine. Yeah. If did you give it to? Okay.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome and greetings to everyone. I'm here wearing two hats. The first one is as representing the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation from South Africa as a co-coordinator within the LEAP-RE program. And then the second hat is basically why I'm sitting at the front this afternoon, because in as much as we are a co-funder, or rather in as much as we are a co-coordinator of LEAP-RE together with LGI, we also are a funding agency and we fund 12 projects within Pillar 1 of LEAP-RE. So as part of the intervention that I'll be providing this afternoon, I'll just be speaking about efficiency and attractiveness of joint programming and joint calls, and I'll basically be highlighting our experience as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation and our experience from an African funding agency perspective. So maybe just to highlight one of the key areas of learning, I think it's really about addressing national problems of global relevance and looking at issues of policy alignment. And so here, what we've seen through LEAP-RE is that national challenges and problems such as load shedding, which is very specific to South Africa, but it's also found in other African countries, and also the need for resilient local energy systems is not something which is an isolated crisis that is unique to South Africa, but it is in fact a local problem that has a very much global dimension. And in this context, the attractiveness and value of joint research, such as what we do in LEAP-RE, is that it becomes an entry point for collective efforts in solving problems and collective efforts to engage in groundbreaking research aimed at identifying how renewable energy systems can operate in peri-urban and also village communities and off-grid environments. And also how communities themselves can actually become part of the process of co-designing the joint research and co-developing the solutions. And so what is also important to highlight from this perspective is that shared challenges and mutual interests actually drive the efficiency of joint programs like LEAP-RE. At least that has been the case for us as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. And when our researchers in South Africa and their counterparts in the rest of Africa and also in Europe work on problems that matter locally but also resonate globally, such as clean cooking, hydrogen storage, agrivoltaics, or bioenergy, both sides actually gain knowledge and data that is transferable and also scalable. And in practical terms, these projects have demonstrated for us that addressing South Africa's energy security is inseparable from addressing our partners' transition to sustainable energy. And the result for us is that what we've recognized through these programs and the participation of our institutions is that there has been an integrated body of evidence that local innovation ecosystems can inform global sustainability agendas. Sorry, I forgot to move my slide. And aligning perfectly, for instance, on the European side with the Green Deal and also with the STI strategy for Africa and Agenda 2063. And then the second theme is with regards to co-developing and co-creating along the research, development, and innovation value chain. So this is something that we've also recognized as something which is quite attractive about joint programs like LEAP-RE. And what we've observed is that the efficiency of such programs for us is best seen in how it structures collaboration along the entire research, development, and innovation value chain. And in the portfolio of 12 projects that we fund as the DSTI, through the management of our partner institution, the South African National Energy and Development Institute, what we have noted is that each partner institution contributes a very specific competence, which has led to several quantitative and qualitative outcomes. So, for instance, universities like the Tshwane University of Technology and even the University of Cape Town, they anchor fundamental and applied research. Then we have industry partners like Ekasi Energy and also the Green Solar Academy, which translate prototypes into market-ready systems. And then while other partners from the rest of the African continent and also on the European side provide advanced modeling, testing, and certification expertise, ensuring that technologies and services developed through the projects meet international standards. And so this distributed model of innovation from concept to pilot to scale up shows that joint programs like LEAP-RE are not necessarily a duplication, but they provide a platform for complementarity. And this is really what we mean by the research, development, and innovation value chain. And something that I'd also like to highlight is that one of the projects, the Pyro Biofuel project, for example, it demonstrates how co-developed technologies in bioenergy and waste valorization can move from lab to demonstration stage, precisely because each partner within the project carries specific expertise within the research, development, and innovation value chain. And this approach, we feel that it also, what we've observed is that it also builds mutual accountability, because when results depend on all the nodes of partners within the consortia and from each institution participating, collaboration then becomes more efficient. So what we need to appreciate is that efficiency in joint programming comes from distributed capability and clear functional complementarity across the entire value chain. And equally important is co-creation, embedded a culture, the co-creation of the research and the innovation. This actually also embeds within the program a culture of transdisciplinary collaboration. And so you have engineers who work closely with social scientists. You have people that are gender experts collaborating with entrepreneurs. You have local artisans working with entrepreneurs. And this for us is something which is quite groundbreaking within LEAP-RE, which we have not seen before, having participated in quite a number of Africa-Europe research and innovation partnership programs. And then lastly, I do okay. So lastly, I do want to maybe look forward and maybe provide some offerings, just two elements of what I think from our perspective as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation is quite important moving forward, especially when we look at a long-term partnership on renewable energy. So what are some of the key priorities that need to be encapsulated in that? So one of the areas that has become quite important is just the idea of innovation-led industrialization. And we are observing as an institution within the policy-making space that science, technology, and innovation need to move from just being a research endeavor to actually being an endeavor which drives industrialization. And so this is something that is very important. And as we look forward, the future of Africa-Europe cooperation, one of the key takeaways as well from the LEAP-RE experience is that projects that have been funded, that we have funded, have shown that when local scientists and innovators work at the frontier of renewable energy technologies, whether in green hydrogen, biofuels, or smart standalone systems, they are simultaneously building the technological foundations for our industrialization. And this is the approach that I think needs to be taken moving forward when we speak about a long-term partnership. And then the other aspect is with regards to the potential of industrial applications. And we're really of the view that when scaled strategically, the outputs from these types of joint research programs can actually stimulate local manufacturing, it can create skills development, and also advance entrepreneurial ecosystems. And it's quite interesting. One of the projects that we fund in Stellenbosch, it is an SMME. They produce a small cooking stove. And they're really moving towards industrial scale, although it is still maybe at a local level, but they also actually employ women from the local peri-urban communities. And so we're seeing this this intersection between innovation and industrialization, albeit actually at a small scale, but it's quite encouraging for us sitting at the policy making space because we want to make sure that research moves towards commercialization. And then the final input, looking forward and looking towards the future, is just with regards to science diplomacy. And the future of our long-term partnership on renewable energy. And here, equally, LEAP-RE has been a living demonstration of science diplomacy in action. I think this was mentioned by Madame Drake. It was also mentioned by Prof. Zerga. And we've seen through the joint calls that African and European scientists, policymakers, and funding agencies have not only just shared data, we've built trust, which is a very important part of diplomacy. And we've also built a common language of cooperation. And I think moving forward, we don't always speak about this common language of cooperation, but it's something that we actually need to build on, and it's something that we need to uncover even more. And this has been So science diplomacy is really what transforms joint programming from a funding mechanism into a platform for partnership, and not just a platform for partnership, but a platform for transformative cooperation. And science diplomacy allows us to align diverse national interests under shared priorities, which, though may have distinct local orientations, also require efforts from global partners. And we've seen that in action. And we feel that from a long-term partnership perspective, we need to build on the community of practice that we've developed within this program regarding science diplomacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those very interesting words that you have. I will give the floor to François, who has also a few insights.
Thank you, Tiniko. Yes, thank you, Philippe. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to be there for this final conference from LEAP-RE. I have a short presentation. Yes, I think it is. So I will focus on the attractiveness of co-funding calls for research and innovation, and like a witness of what we experienced within LEAP-RE for several years. As Tiniko said, I am from ANR, from the French National Research Agency, who was coordinating Pillar 1, dedicated to the calls, co-funding calls, with the Ministry of Research and Education in Algeria. So for those who are not used to what is the co-funding instrument in the European Commission, just to recall that it's several national funding organizations on research and innovation from different countries cooperate in order to launch common joint calls for research and innovation. Each funding organization, whether it's a ministry or a dedicated agency, commit a budget in order to support the researchers and the innovators from its own country. And beside and beyond this funding from national funding organization, the European Commission bring what we call a top-up, which is a supplementary budget in order to be able to fund more projects than that could be happen with the budget from the national funding organization. And I think here the fact that these funding national funding organization are involved, it's witness the involvement of the governments. And I come back of what Tiniko said about science diplomacy, because we are not only mobilizing researchers and engineers and inventors, innovators in this country, but also a cooperation between governments. And I think that's a specificity very important for the attractiveness of this instrument. So within LEAP-RE, we experimented through 2 calls, as it has been already said by Ms. Drake and Tiniko, with the participation of several funding organizations in Africa and in Europe. For the 2 calls, we had 7 funding organizations in Africa and 10 in Europe who cooperate in order to launch calls together. So, see, in Africa, we had mainly countries participating from North Africa and South Africa, participating in the call, and several countries in Europe. So the 2 calls, a few numbers just to give you the what we succeed. For the 2 calls, we had more than 160 applications, proposals from projects coming from teams from both continents. We were through a two-step process with the standards of the European Commission process. And at least we funded 23 projects after a pre-selection of more than 51. As you can see on the bottom on the left, the budget funding these projects came from up to more than 12 million euros from the funding organization and 3.4 million euros coming from the European Commission budget. As you can see also, we had more than 50% of the teams and the researchers are coming from Africa and a few less than 50% from Europe. And we had several thematics, several topics, what we call multi-annual roadmaps, and all roadmaps were addressed for these projects, whatever it's going through renewable energy in standalone systems at a very individual level, smart grids, but also recycling of renewable energy components, clean cooking, and so on. As I said, for the two calls, for the first call launched in 2020, 21, we selected 13 projects, and in the second call in 2022, we selected 10 projects. And this project addressed renewable energy in a large sense, but also more specifically, we had projects dealing with hydrogen, green hydrogen in these two calls. We had projects on digitalization of smart grids, on PV, agri-PV, that's mean in the same land, using PV and agriculture activities, and also, of course, clean cooking, recycling, and so on. I want to show you, to come back on the issue of attractiveness of this instrument, of this process of co-funding. On the left part, you have the map of Europe and Africa within, and the countries which were participating to the call within LEAP-RE. And you see, as I said, that in Europe, we have a diversity of countries, and in Africa, we have mostly countries from North Africa and South Africa. And on the right part is, at this stage, the mobilization for LEAP-RE. Ms. Drake said that, recall that LEAP-RE is a new program of the European Commission coming after LEAP-RE. We already launched a first call, which is under evaluation. And today we are announcing the launch of the second call, and Marie-Laure Tarot, after this session, will just present briefly this new call, which will be launched next month. And at this stage, you have here the countries, both in Europe and in Africa, who intend to participate to the, well, already participated to the first call, who are looking to participate to the second one. And you can see the enlargement of the countries interested in this process of co-funding calls for research and innovation. As I said at the beginning, we had mostly North African countries and South African. Now, as you can see, we have also countries from West Africa, from East Africa, and even the southern part. For example, Namibia, we have Cameroon on board, Senegal, we hope Kenya and Ethiopia. Some of them have to be confirmed. And for example, in Europe also we have Poland, Slovenia joining, and we hope UK, we were speaking with them yesterday, and we hope they will come. So I think this is an important process, and of course, LEAP-RE, for us, part of the job was to attract and to show to these countries to join. Another map showing the interest in LEAP-RE in Africa, because in fact, besides these co-funding activities at national level, we introduce a new process within LEAP-RE, which allow African partners, it was only for African partners, not from countries not participating to the call, to be present in consortium applying to the call. And for that, we use the EC top-up, the EC budget, a part of the EC budget, in order to fund these teams where there was no funding organization. And on this map, you see the countries from where we receive applicants for LEAP-RE first call, which was launched in January of this year, in 2025. So you see that we receive from Africa more than 600 applications coming from 30 countries from Africa. That means that in those countries where there was no funding agencies, even these researchers knew that there was LEAP-RE call, they were interested and they applied. So I think it's a very important process in order to enlarge this attractiveness. And you see, that's why between LEAP-RE and LEAP-RE, we succeed to enlarge the participation in Africa. Just to conclude, let me step beside LEAP-RE and to raise your attention on a report. So I'm not speaking about LEAP-RE anymore. It's a report done by a think tank, an international think tank called AMBER. And this think tank analyzes the importation of solar panel in Africa each year. And I don't know if you know this report published in June this year. The importation of solar panel in Africa increased in 1 year by 60% between the 12th previous month from June of this year and the precedent period. 60% of increase. It means that the capacity installed in Africa on solar panel raised from 9 gigawatt to more than 15 gigawatt in 1 year. And the main countries of importation were from South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria, Egypt. And within these countries, 25 countries imported more than 100 megawatt. And so the share of the electricity produced in 12 countries in Africa is more than 5% due to this increase of importation. And the last observation they have made is that in Nigeria, for example, where the oil is quite cheap because it's an oil producer, the substitution of diesel by solar panels could be reimbursed in 6 months since the solar panel are now very competitive regarding fossil fuels. So I thought this report was very interesting to show that solar energy is now a new game changer, even in Africa, and I think it could give hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, François. Now I will give the floor to our panelist. He is online. So, Mokhtar, you have the floor for a few words.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Philippe. Good evening to all colleagues. Mrs. Deputy Director General, if she's still there, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to share with you a few reflections on the African Union, European Union Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Cooperation Framework. In particular, the historic LEAP Renewable Energy Program that has proven that African and European researchers can work as equal in science and innovation to convert excellence research in market-ready solutions. It's now time to think on how to transform their successes into a permanent co-funding ecosystem where every penny, shilling, dinar, dirham, and I don't know, African money and euros, of course, invested leads not only to publication, but to projects, startups, and social impact. The initiative of the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Partnership is really the landmark example of co-ownership, co-design, and co-implementation between the African Union and the European Union, gathering dozens of partners from different countries. This is a particular and strong point I want to highlight. By strengthening our European-African partnership, we are also strengthening the continental partnership. We have very few opportunities in our continent that allows researchers from Northern, Eastern, Western, Central, or Southern Africa to collaborate together. Thanks for giving us this opportunity. When LEAP Renewable energy was launched, our vision was to create an inclusive research and innovation ecosystem capable of driving a just and sustainable energy ecosystem. And today, as we look at the outcomes of this first large-scale AU joint programming, the key questions is how do we make joint programming both efficient and attractive? And how do we sustain this in the next phase of the green energy partnership? Yet, efficiency also has its challenges, and there are no failures, just lessons for improvement. Main priorities are to institutionalize like mechanisms of partnership by an EU joint programming secretariat that coordinates calls, evaluation, and guiding cycles in securing funding from both sides, integrating human capital by coupling research calls with teaming and twinning and mobility for young researchers. And of course, we hope a strong meal, a strong monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. Let's say, as we move beyond LEAP renewable energy, we must ensure that the results achieved are scaled up and mainstreamed within national development plans, and that Africa takes its rightful place as a global player in clean energy innovation, not as a consumer, but as a producer of knowledge, technology, and solution. The EU climate change and sustainable energy is not only a roadmap. It's a movement of minds and community, a testament to what collaboration can achieve when driven by shared values. Let me say at end that LEAP-RE, it's important to mention that this project is also an extraordinary human experience, creating new links across continents, connecting brilliant minds, and unifying good researchers who truly deserve recognition. Thank you for your attention. I hope to meet you soon, maybe tomorrow evening. Back to you, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mokhtar. So I thank the three panelists for their sort of interesting perspective and words. I'll, let's say, open the floor for question. First reaction that you may have on their intervention. So if you have questions, let's see. Yeah, I think the first hand was on that side.
I think my question is for Tiniko. What exactly do we mean by indigenous knowledge? And given, because I'm looking at Kenya, for example, the indigenous is a lot of people. Is there like a specific like term reference there?
So I think I was actually making reference to indigenous technology. Yeah, not indigenous knowledge. But I was just highlighting that particularly from the African perspective, that developing indigenous technology is very important. And right now, we're also speaking about technological sovereignty. So, and this is also quite interesting when you look at issues of science diplomacy. Even the notion of sovereignty, we tend to look at it from a political perspective. We speak about the sovereignty of the state. But now, when you look at what's happening globally and you look at geopolitics, technology is something that has become highly politicized. And that's why developing indigenous technologies and developing some sort of sovereignty around technology is very important, particularly in relation to energy security. And so I guess the point that I was trying to make is that what has really worked quite well for us within this program, within LEAP-RE as the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, is that we've had the opportunity as a result of the funding that we have put on the table and the money that we have invested to actually develop and to even scale up technology that we had created. So I'd made reference to a smart cooking stove, which is actually developed by one of our SMMEs in South Africa. The interesting part about that is that we've actually been struggling to get local uptake, but we're getting more uptake in other regions in the continent. So I think, yeah, it was just the point on technological sovereignty and indigenous technology as being something which is very important.
So I'm going to do a follow-up on that, which is, do you think that, would you say that includes the what we call the informal ecosystem on the continent, which tends to be outside the let me say the formal ecosystem, which is like installers of solar, of electricity, or whatever, but they normally aren't like certified formally speaking. Do you think, I'm speaking now to the future, like including them into the ecosystem? Does that include something like that?
Yes, definitely it does. And I think something else that I made reference to was, for instance, in some of the projects, some of the partners that are more experienced, that do carry the expertise, are also assisting with the certification of some innovations which are actually emerging. And I guess that's part of the attractiveness, that's part of the efficiency that we speak about. Yeah.
In fact, if I may add, on the 12 demonstration projects that we do have, the topic on which they were selected specifically requested that they do look at developing the local value chain in terms of manufacturing and installing. So this is also something that I agree with you is quite important to keep. There was other question here.
Greetings to everyone in attendance, and thanks to the chair of the session. I like the question you asked, especially the inclusion of, let's call them people who are informal installers and so forth. So my name is Mkhululi Senna. I'm a project coordinator from the South African National Energy Development Institute, SANEDI, and we are assisting the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation with implementation of 12 projects across various research institutions in South Africa. So what we found is that on one of the projects, I'll start with the one that Tinyiko mentioned, the development of the smart clean cooking stove. So there's a company in Paarl in South Africa, which is not too far out of Cape Town. What they do is they have designed clean cooking stoves. So they do not finish the product in their factory. They are capable of producing about 4,000 stoves a month, but what they do is they do the machining of the product, but then it comes out as panels that have been pre-machined using their laser cutters and so forth. Then they flat pack the product onto trucks, and this allows them to move greater volumes since the stoves are just flat packed. Then they ship them off to the end users, the markets in Kenya, Angola, Malawi, and those other countries. The strategy that they use is then they use the local people in the villages to complete the stove by bending the flat panels into the final form. So what that does is it gives the local communities who benefit from the use of those stoves a sense of ownership over the finished product, and that is what we have seen actually is a key driver to the commercial uptake of the developed technology. So in that sense, yes, there is an element of bringing the informal installers into this. A second example I want to provide is on the optimized mini grids project, OptiMG. The whole purpose of that project is to create an open access system where maybe a farmer, a peri-urban or a rural community, small-scale farmer, can actually go into the software platform and as an input provide his energy like he can create his own model of what his current energy setup is and where he wishes to go in terms of incorporating renewables, solar energy, wind energy, and whatever other, maybe even a micro hydro system that he's got access to. But then he'll be able to tailor the inputs to model his current energy configuration and then where he wants to go. So how many watts or gigawatt, no, not giga, sorry, megawatts of renewable energy he wants to introduce into his system, and he can then get a personalized model. But it won't be an off-the-shelf solution that he's got access to. He'll have access to a personalized solution based on the resources immediately available to him. And that, again, is an example of how we are incorporating the informal sector into the entire LEAP-RE program. So it's solutions, sustainable solutions for that matter, for local communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Wawire from Kenya, and I just have a question come observation on the innovation aspect of the projects. If I look at the project cycle centered around 5 years, if you look at Kenya, where I come from, we work in a very capitalistic environment, a willing buyer, willing seller, and then we have products coming in from places like China. We have businesses that can easily set up a franchise in Kenya and bring in an innovation from China, even from Europe, outside the LEAP-RE cycle. What is the strategy to have these innovations when they move into the market, that they stay ahead of this curve? Because my anxiety is that some of the innovations, by the time they come into the market, they might find things have really moved further ahead, and the innovation is not really an innovation anymore. And furthermore, in the market, there are systems that need to be in place to support that product as it goes into the market. If just an example in Kenya, in my experience, we have a company that is really doing a lot of off-grid called Sun King in Kenya. And one of their big attractions is they have a financial credit system embedded with their products. So when they go into the villages, they are able to offer these products without any security on credit, maybe a monthly payment over 2 years. They have developed an ecosystem around recovering the money. That might look more attractive to someone than the actual advantages of the product over another one. And these are systems that might not come with these innovations as they go into the market. So my observation is, do we have a strategy around making these innovations competitive when they get into the market? Competitive against what will be there or what is already there? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you would like to, any of the panelists like to answer that. I would say my first sort of reaction to your comments is this is exactly the problem we have also in Europe. That sort of the incumbent technologies has a full market share, and how you have a new technology can take part of that. So this is a question that we are also thinking about, and I think it's one of those problems or issues that we can jointly sort of try to find a solution.
Yeah, I think, maybe there are a range of solutions that could be provided, especially just in the context of making sure that the technologies remain relevant in the market, because I guess it's also about other systems that are in place within the government. So even issues of public procurement, local procurement, and creating the conditions around that, where government actually provides support to SMMEs, those kind of SMMEs that might have your entry-level type of technologies, and providing them with the kind of support and environment for market uptake. And in South Africa, we've got that's something that we're actually working on. It's also an issue where we're actually working quite closely with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. But I'd also like to maybe invite my colleagues from the South African National Energy Development Institute to also maybe expound a bit more, especially just our experiences. Yeah, colleagues.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mkhululi, once more. I caught a key aspect of the question you were asking, and let me address that key aspect. If you feel that I need to address more aspects of the question, I'll come in again. I like the question you asked where you said, how do we make sure that these innovations stay ahead of the curve, and something interesting popped into mind. I had a recent engagement with no, it was not an engagement. It was a presentation at another conference, rather. So in terms of the innovation staying ahead of the curve, maybe in terms of sustainability, that should not be, no, let me not say that should not be. That should only be part of the solution. Another part of the solution is how do we make the innovations sustainable? In other words, do they solve a real challenge for a particular community? And the example I'm bringing about is of a company in South Africa that manufactures a PV solution. So what they found is that when load shedding started, like the severe load shedding that we had 2-3 years ago as a country, when it started shortly before COVID. So there was an uptake of imported solar panels from China in South Africa. And the solution was to cater for load shedding. But then this company, they removed their focus from that. They said, we want to build solar PV solutions for the African market. So the Chinese products, I don't know how to say that in a diplomatic way. I don't want to get into trouble. There's a public platform. Let me say the products that were imported from certain Chinese producers, it was found that they're not resilient in the African market. So this South African company produced solar PV solutions from materials, and they built the configuration in such a way that their solution, once installed, actually outperformed the imported version. So they are currently one of the, let me say, in terms of their own metrics, they are one of the best suppliers of solar PV solutions for the African market, in a sense that the materials that they use, the type of inverters that they use, the type of batteries that they use, provide their customers with resilient solutions, not solutions that were based on load shedding. So I think we need to introduce that element of, does your solution provide, does your technological innovation provide a solution for the locals? In other words, is it a sustainable solution? Because if you're only solving part of the problem, then 7 to 10 years down the line, all that becomes wasted effort. But that's just one example I had to give in terms of staying ahead of the curve. In your case, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. And just to support Nico as well, I think one of the key things is that from the lessons learned here, we need to possibly put together a repository and have sort of a data-driven analytics and build a sort of a scorecard, a technology commercialization scorecard, and also compile information so that we remain ahead of the actual technology curve. Those are some of my contributions.
Just a small clarification on the Chinese systems, renewable systems that have come into Africa. My experience is that the problem was that Africa didn't have standards. So basically, we were taking what you are being told. And when we did some of the tests in Kenya, for example, some of the output on the solar panels was not what was declared. So the solution, I think, is for Africa to develop, to move fast enough, especially on renewables and these new technologies and new innovations, and develop standards. And it will be better even if they develop one standard, rather than South Africa has a standard, Kenya has a standard, who has a standard on, and then you have the different components which you have again standards. If they have one standard, and if you say, okay, this product is manufactured in South Africa, so we don't need to again go through another round of testing and standardization. So the Chinese problem was not that they produce substandard products. The problem was that we didn't have standards. And if you don't have standards, someone will create them for you. And if we go around and develop, right now in Kenya, I think we have developed the standards for the solar panels using both, and that is a whole value chain, from the people who are doing the maintenance, the builders, the components, and so on. So that helps with the market, stabilizing the market.
Thank you. I think Francois wants to intervene, and we have just last question over there.
Yes, thank you, Philippe. It's about this issue of value chain sovereignty of technologies and the importation from China. The last slide I presented on the Amber report is importation from China, but China right now is producing more than 85% of the whole market of solar panel in the world. And in Europe, as Philippe said, we face the same situation. Or almost 100% of the solar installation in Europe are from Chinese modules or cells imported. So I think it shows that for solar energy, it's surging in Europe and in Africa, as the number said, 60% increase. But we are, as I said, facing the same issue, and I think then LEAP-RE and to work together on research and innovation is how to have the value chain developed in Europe and in Africa, and how we could produce. And there is a number I think is interesting. In Europe, at least, the cost of the solar panel is only 1/3 of the total investments in solar installation. 1/3. Of course, it's important, but it means that there is a large part of the value chain which is beyond the fact that we import solar panels. And again, I think what that we have to develop together is how to create a large part of the value chain in Africa and in Europe in order to increase the jobs and the economics development.
Thank you, François. I think the last question, otherwise we'll be fired.
Thank you very much. My name is Teresia Bilola from ICOS ERIC. My question is related to the co-funding calls and the pattern of having most of the countries from the north of Africa and the south of Africa. What are the lessons learned or the solutions that you have developed or that you can suggest for reducing this pattern? It's a pattern that is also seen in most of the funding that is directed towards Africa. And we know that Africa is not just the north and the south.
Well, as I said, within LEAP-RE, we'll say at the beginning of the cooperation on renewable energy and research and innovation, we are the first country interested were the North African countries and South Africa. And I think this was due to the fact that those countries are quite much more invested and more involved in research and innovation in general. In Africa, they have maybe more means in terms of budget possibility, but as I saw as I showed in the slide I presented, we succeed to attract through these co-funding activities other countries, because also, as I said, we introduced the issue that we could, in those projects, in those programs, also make eligible partners coming from other countries. And you could think, okay, then it's not need to involve the government. But in fact, we have seen through now LEAP-RE that more and more African countries from West Africa, I said Senegal, Ivory Coast, I hope they could join. And in East Africa, we have Kenya, Ethiopia, who want to join, Namibia now. So we saw that there is a diversity of other African countries who are attracted, who are interested to follow this scheme. And I think this is very interesting, and we have to promote, and it's our job in some way.
Yeah, I think we can sort of still continue this sort of questioning later, but I think we are at the end of our session, and I will leave the floor to, I think it's Mrs. Taro from Miner to present the next call for proposal from LEAP-RE. Thanks all my panelists.
Thank you, Philippe. So I have some slides. So first of all, good afternoon, everybody. So I will speak about the pre-announcement of the call, a lot of details will be indicated in the call text, and for some question you might have, I will not be able to answer it because it's not yet publicly available. So you have information on the news. So first of all, I wanted to start. Okay, where is? Okay. With some result for the first call for the one who are not fully aware of. So the first projects for the first call are not selected yet, but you can have some insights of how it goes on the number of proposals. So you can see that we had a very great success for the first call because we had more than 170 applications with coordinators from African Union and European Union, mainly on the European side, with more than 1,000 partners in general involved in those programs. For the first call, we had 7 topics, and we had application for all those 7 topics, and most of the projects are linked to several topics of our calls and not only one, as it was also before on LEAP-RE projects. And as you can see, and as mentioned by François, we also have a mechanism to try to enlarge the number of countries participating to our project, with LGI acting as a funder for African partners without a funding organization. But we can see on the slide that we have, of course, and that makes sense, more application from the countries participating to the call in Europe and also in Africa. So regarding this second call, we have different funding organizations. We have new funding organizations that are confirmed. For example, we have Slovenia and Poland, which are confirmed, and it should be okay also for Cameroon, and for other countries it's still to be confirmed due to the process of signing the grant agreement or to have the confirmation of the budget from the ministry, and sometimes it takes quite some time. But it's good to see that we have new funding organization interest in our calls. So regarding some rules of the call for projects that are interesting for potential applicants, so we, as we did since the beginning, so also in LEAP-RE, have a mandatory condition to have 2 partners from the European Union or Horizon Europe associating countries, and 2 partners from the African Union, and each time from different countries. In addition, that since the second call of LEAP-RE, we want in each consortium to have at least 1 partner from the private sector, so a commercial company, or 1 institutional research partner. You will have more details on the call text to be published. In addition, each partner will have to comply with the rule of each national funding organization. And for example, as I'm representing the French National Funding Organization, my organization may contract only with the French partners. The same goes for partners in Europe and in Africa, with the exception for the partners without funding organization, which have contract with LGI. And as typical rule, all proposals are submitted on a dematerialized platform, so on a website. Regarding here the different dates, so as maybe mentioned, but now for sure mentioned, so we'll launch this call in November, middle of November, and it will be open for a bit more than 2 months, with after eligibility from the funding organization and an evaluation from an independent panel. The result will be given to the applicant in the end of April, and 2 months after proposal selected for the second step will have to submit their full proposal, and again eligibility check on evaluation. The evaluation criteria follows the one of the European Union, so scientific excellence, impact, quality and efficiency of the implementation, with sub-criteria that will be detailed in the call text. And of course, this evaluation is not made by the funding organization or ministries or partners in general involved in LEAP-RE. It's made by an independent review panel composed of experts working in Europe and in Africa. We try to have a good gender balance in our panel and also to have experts from research academia, but also from private sector. And that's also, if you have questions about the call for project, we have a mailbox only for this kind of question. You have a bit more detail on the pre-announcement available on the LEAP-RE website. And if you are a bit confused to find the link, you can also have the link on our LinkedIn post, Twitter, on X post on the social media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Laure. So I'm sure you have plenty of questions regarding the eligibility conditions and so on, but we will also plan some webinars.
Yes.
So I guess we will have further opportunities. We will also have a coffee break and a cocktail after. So you will come to harass Marie-Laure and ask all the questions you have. Thank you very much, Marie-Laure.
Thank you, Luna.
So now let's move to the second session. We actually saw that this co-funding mechanism has been producing a portfolio of projects that generate plenty of research and innovation outputs that increase knowledge, that increase capacities in Africa and Europe beneficiaries. So I now invite Anne Wambugu, electrical researcher at Strathmore University in Kenya, to moderate the next session.
Thank you, Leonard. Thanks, everyone. I'd like to start by inviting the panelists. Sorry, I noticed there was a thing that was moved here. So Arina Anisi from IRENA, who brings expertise on innovation in power systems to the panel. Giacomo Falchetta from the Institute of International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, who worked on the RE4GRE project in LEAP-RE. Then I don't think Ricardo is here, is he? Okay, 1 minute, 2 minutes, okay. And then there's Sandro Zabo from the Joint Research Center, who has past experience in EU's Innovation Agency. Okay, so the aim of this panel specifically is to see how we can effectively translate research knowledge into tangible innovations that accelerate the energy transition. So the context for this is that electrification is currently lagging. It's not what we expected it to be at this point. And it's not just a technical challenge. It's a challenge that has multiple long-term strategies targeting. So there's the Agenda 2063, there's EU Innovation Agenda that we're discussing today. And with the panel today, yes, so I'd like to invite each of the panelists to tell us a bit more about themselves. And then as you answer your first question, so we're going to just do give us the introduction, tell us who you are, and then answer the first question. So I'll start with Arina, which is from IRENA's perspective on innovation. Oh, 1 second. So IRENA's perspective on innovation is broad, and it includes not just technology, but policy and social aspects. Could you define for us what innovation means in the context of the energy transition?
Hello. So first of all, thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me here today. As I mentioned, just to introduce a little bit myself, my name is Arina Anisi. I work at International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, since 9 years now, and I'm leading the innovation work, particularly the Innovation Landscape Reports and Innovation Week, which are the flagship events of flagship products of IRENA. And thank you for the question. IRENA has, I will try to explain what is innovation, because innovation is a lot of things. But one thing we are trying to always, a message that we're trying to send to the policymakers is innovation must and goes beyond technology. Technological innovation is very important, but in order to have innovative solutions that are implementable and are successful on the ground, we need innovation in business models to ensure a revenue stream for this technology. We need innovation in regulation, in market design, to incentivize a certain behavior of the technology, and we need innovation even in system operation and system planning. This is what we called in IRENA systemic innovation approach. And this is, we have been looking at innovations of integrating renewables, of smart electrification with this systemic approach. In the last couple of years, we have been also starting to look at a renewable solution for sustainable development, which is more like looking at what are the innovations that are also particularly needed in Global South to use renewables for sustainable development. And we see that innovation must go even beyond the systemic innovation that we initially created, that it's a very, still quite a technical understanding of the innovation, and we must innovate also in how the whole environment is to enable these innovations and these solutions to flourish. And what I mean by that, we also need to innovate in the policy, particularly in policy that support local value creation. And we have talked a little bit in the previous session also about the importance of local manufacturing, the creation of skills, jobs, localization of value supply chains. And these are very important to ensure sustainable development with renewables. Then we also need to innovate in the financing mechanism. We need a shift from profit-driven investment, what we see mostly today, to impact-driven investment and look beyond just making profit, but also, considering also the risk of leaving anyone behind, of not meeting the SDGs. This is very important. The financial architecture, it's also not enabling, let's say, a lot of flourishing of renewable innovation. And we also need to innovate in different financial mechanisms to create more fiscal space for this country, especially in the Global South, to have resources to invest in renewable solutions. And last but not least, it's also about creating a narrative around energy transition that it's more people-centric, engaging more communities, having their engagement, their participation, and most importantly, their endorsement. It's key to have a successful energy transition. And looking also at indigenous knowledge, as we have seen, and bottom-up solutions, and really being more participatory and not just top-down. So innovation is very broad, but these are aspects that we are looking on at IRENA on innovation. And just to say that early next year in January, we will launch the third innovation landscape report that it's exactly on sustainable growth powered by renewables, focused particularly in Africa and more generally in Global South, of what innovations can be, thrive there.
Thank you. So as the discussions are going on, I'd like you to keep that in mind, that we're not talking about technical innovations alone. This conversation is around innovation in general at a systemic level, whether it's policy, as she's mentioned, or technical or social, whatever needs to be done for us to achieve our electrification goals. So Ricardo has just come in. So I'm going to ask the questions. The point is, when you get your question, introduce yourself and then answer the question. Yeah. So I'll ask actually a linked question for Giacomo and Ricardo. So for Giacomo, your project RE4Agree focused on techno-economic and business model research. So from your perspective, how can we effectively move such research from just academic papers to real-world applications? And then essentially, how do we build the structured partnerships needed to translate the research into socioeconomic impact envisioned by the AU-EU high-level policy dialogue? And it's very, I know it's a very in-depth question, but feel free to also just explain to everyone what RE4Agri is as you going through that. And then for Ricardo, I'd like you to build on what he'll have mentioned and talk to us about Microgrid Spy, which is a technological tool that was designed to support policy innovation. And you made the strategic choice to make it open source. So rather than commercializing it. So can you elaborate on the thinking behind that decision and discuss any consequences that have ended up coming out of it, whether it's fundraising or any other issues? So I'll let you guys answer. And please remember to introduce yourself as you're answering.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for the invitation to this distinguished panel. My name is Giacomo Falchetta. I am a research scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA in short, which is a research organization fostering the research to policy bridge based in Vienna. And I have been co-leading the RE4Agri project, part of LEAP-RE. The RE4Agri project stands for Renewables for African Agriculture. It was a project mainly looking at the agricultural value chain and the role that electricity and the input of electricity from renewables can have and what strategies can be leveraged to foster the take-up of such renewable energy in the sector. But to address your question, I think this is fundamentally a project of multiple agencies and incentives alignment. That is to say that we can think of this problem as a set of pieces of the puzzle where we have the research, which is the evidence provider. So basically the starting point or a necessary but not sufficient condition for this process. That is to say the evidence of what are the techno-economic potential of given innovations, of given technologies, what are their expected socioeconomic impacts and so forth. However, there are many more pieces of the puzzle when it comes to translating what the research is doing into actual implementation of innovation on the ground. So we can think about different actors or pieces of the puzzle. One is the problem owner, which I would say is in the first place the public authorities and the policymakers, who are those which have the mandate to address certain questions of societal development that are tied to innovation. So they have the role to provide the policy framework and the policies to send incentive signals to make sure that innovation is perceived as important, profitable, and effective to achieve societal goal by a set of actors. We then have the solution providers. So the solution providers are those who innovate, so the businesses, the SMEs, and so forth, who, of course, we know that in Africa there is a very thriving innovation environment. So the ideas, I don't think those are the main hurdle. The hurdle is how to make those ideas turn them into reality, and for that we need capital, so we need finance, and so we have the finance as the further piece of the puzzle, which is key. So the role that local banks, multilateral development organizations can play in unlocking this capital, because the demand side is there, but demand side is credit constrained and capital constrained. So you need development banks and local sources of low risk, low-cost capital that can enable these innovations and enable things like blended finance and this type of strategies that we are seeing as increasingly effective. So to wrap up your question, I think that the role of LEAP-RE and the role of this type of partnership is in the first place to identify and promote the space for these new forms of partnership where there is really a focus on aligning these incentives and these different agencies to make this piece of the puzzle stuck together and translate science like the one we did in RE4Agri, say on solar irrigation, into investment in this innovation and their actual materialization. So I think the human skills development as well is a key component of this type of program to make sure that these things turn into reality. Of course, this is a broad question, so happy to expand later in the Q&A, but thank you.
So I'll hand over to Ricardo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me in this panel. I'm Riccardo Mereu. I'm working at Politecnico di Milano in Italy as a professor. And I was co-leading Setadisma. That was, let's say, a project inside LEAP-RE, of course, related to what? To the idea of, let's say, improve, giving innovation, let's say, to the system energy modeling approach. And obviously for which kind of, let's say, purpose, for the mini-grids. For mini-grids with a specific, let's say, application in Africa, in the sub-Saharan context. Why that? Because, let's say, we strongly believe, looking at also the tools that were available, let's say, worldwide, that we needed to move from, let's say, the sizing, the also optimal sizing. That is something that is very well, let's say, common in many of the softwares available, to the energy planning. This means taking into consideration what? Not only the technical sizing, like can be optimal with the PV, et cetera, but also the demand, the energy demand. That is a key factor in, especially in some areas where, as you know, the access to energy is something that is new and is in continuous evolution. It is in somehow going to be part of the evolution of the context. Setadisma was the project that permitted to develop more MicroSPI. MicroSPI started before Setadisma, of course, was the way to integrate it and to integrate also with all, let's say, the knowledge that the other partners had about the local context. This is, let's say, Setadisma in 1 minute after more than 2 years of work, but okay. What is important about open source? Why open source? This is a good question. We decided to stay open source, not only with MicroSPI, but also with other, let's say, software that we are developing in our research group. I think for too many reasons. From one side, we are a university. We are also a public university. It is obviously is giving us a mission, a role in the society. And the idea of the open source is that you need for innovation to be able to disseminate knowledge, to permit people to improve the knowledge and to be part of the process of developing these kind of tools. Obviously, this is important from one side. You develop the code, you have the code, everyone can use that. Obviously, this cannot happen without capacity building. The other important aspect that is giving us the opportunity, let's say, to develop this kind of, let's say, knowledge is the capacity building that was part of Setadisma, of course, but is a capacity building that obviously starting from who developed the code and et cetera, but is a way to, let's say, develop innovation through the knowledge that is disseminated to other colleagues that are able then to apply this innovation in the local context and to use this kind of innovation where in the local context for example, local university, local government, local agency, local policymakers. This is the idea of open source that is permitting then to support the innovation at the local level. Obviously, open source means that you need to find money, the fundraising you were talking about. I have to say that there are two main aspects. One is, let's say, part of the fundraising are obviously the calls from European Commission, obviously funding, other fundings, but we have to consider that at that point, the commercialization, if we want, is are the skills, the knowledge of people, because the code can be open source, perfect, but then what you are commercializing is your knowledge, the capability to use the code for what? To provide, for example, a policy brief, to provide to also to private companies that are planning, for example, to install mini grids in Africa, how to optimize the technical choices based on energy planning that is based in evidence-based data for the demand, for the evolution of the demand, etc., etc. There are many other examples, of course. So in this way, you can obviously have your fundraising from what? From your knowledge, the use of the code, and then this is permitting to create also innovation in the application, in the companies that are taking advantage of this knowledge at the contact, let's say, at the local context. Okay.
For that, I think the last question on this one goes to Zabo, and I want you to build on what Ricardo had said, which is we've seen a lot of investments, the Global Gateway, the Africa EU Energy Initiative, with the aim to accelerate clean energy deployment, right? And as the examples have been given, there's projects like RE4GRE, Setadisma, and the outputs that are being built out of that, like the microgrid SPY, right? So from your perspective, what is the role of public funding in helping research projects navigate that path to market? And then specifically, if we're to discuss high impact, we're probably going to have a discussion about open source, right? Which is where the point comes in. So open source projects, how do we support more open source project while ensuring accountability, and open source here being something like microgrid SPY, so that open source does not become an excuse sort of to avoid the challenges of commercial deployment, but at the same time, admitting that sometimes major impact will come from open source.
Thanks. Thanks for the question. I don't promise that I will answer the question if I understood correctly, but I will try to give some different angles. I was working in clean tech innovation for quite a few years, and I have experience from two different angles. I work now in a joint research center next to a laboratory which analyzes performance of PV. We try to work on new standards for bifacial PV, perovskite PV. So we are there to give, stamp that some PVs perform, some others not. I was starting to work on how to make financial systems that support innovation. At the beginning, we were going to these PV conferences, for example, and I saw how differently the African partners and the European partners reacted to the same technology with different financial means. We had Greek, installers. They wanted to have this very sophisticated tracking modules that gives maximum power because they got the subsidy based on the kilowatt hour that it was produced. From Africa, we had more simple system. On a trailer, we had a very simple module setup. But the guy said, look, with this, I go from farm to farm. And with this trailer, I just daily, I move it a little bit. I get the maximum power I can with the hand. And I make irrigation on one piece of land and I go to the next one the next day because they need only the irrigation every month. So I have 30 clients and it was a very simple, very cheap solution. There was another guy doing, combining refrigerators with PV and going to get blood samples, take it to the central hospital and go back with the sample results, and also with vaccination, for example. What has bigger impact in the world? That was already at the beginning my question. These tracking modules are not tracking anymore. They were so complicated that after a few years they just go south and that's it. It was quite impressive already at my career. I was always interested, okay, how to make the real impact. And I went to work for a few years in the European Agency for Innovation and Technology because I wanted to be there at the engine that gives the money, 90 million euro per year for clean tech only. There was a consortium, and I was from the Commission side trying to oversee what are the projects, how they select, and things like that. program was done that this ecosystem builds up from public money is going up from 0 to 90 million per year, and then it goes down, and the driver has to be standing alone on his own feet. He should get the finance and channel it to the project later. So it was a kind of mixture of public and private partnership, how to get the public money and to get involved private finance. And we had successful program. We had also not many successes as well. So for me, the striking element was that if you don't get, local involvement, the project is not initiated by a guy who knows the market. It never worked. And I think this is a message. I heard that we need to have standardization bodies from Africa. It's true. I think you have to give your own stamp that some products some technologies are working. I think it's also the goal of the GRC. We give open access data. We have the African Knowledge Platform. We try to collect data and provide it freely. When we were talking to the African Power Pool, they were astonished. How can you make this information accessible? It's a private information. You should keep it and use it. We don't think it's the way ahead. I think research has this dissemination role, and I think that's I'm happy that Ricardo also, and I think partly the other projects are taking this open access as a core element of this. But I think the important thing in this whole public-private partnership is that, the initiation has to come from the we have this mobility. My kids are using, I like to own a car. They don't care about the ownership of the car. They want to reach from one place to another. They just want to rent a car in the best place or have a moped or an electric bicycle, and they go, because mostly they go in the cities, as I do as well, but I still go with the car. What's the point? Things change, and I think it's already the beginning. From Africa, you also have project, and in LEAP-RE, there were project on electric mobility. I think that driver and the conditions are quite different. I think if you want to have a successful African electric mobility project, they have to know Lagos, they have to know what are the conditions to create this mobility thing. And then the EU can come. We have a very good engine, Get Invest, that's they are professional, but the ticket size is 500 million. I don't think that any of the LEAP-RE project would go there. They would be, straight away get, the finance from Get Invest. But maybe some African institutions could make this gap. They could say, look, we have this LEAP-RE project. I think we know it would work in Nigeria. Let's try to get some interim, funding for this, maybe with the help of the EU, I don't know. But maybe this would be the closing this gap, because then maybe they can bring it from the few 10 million up to 100, and then maybe Get Invest would be say, yes, that's a local project we want to see. I think this is part of the answer to the very complex question, but maybe I managed to give at least some aspect of the answer.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. So we just to summarize everything so far, we've defined innovation, right? We've talked about an example of innovation that can go to markets, and then we've discussed the role of open source in the innovation ecosystem. Specifically, we chose to discuss open source on this panel, and also funding, because there's going to be a lot of discussions about the commercialization element, the non-open source commercialization, the one, I don't know what to call it, but yeah. So I'd like to move us to the next question, which all the panelists will respond to. So we'll start from Giacomo coming this way, which is moving to research, from research to market, which I think you've covered. It requires skills beyond the technical. So what is the role of policy in equipping the ecosystem with the business development and entrepreneurial skills needed to commercialize work? Perhaps through platforms like the AU-EU Innovation Interface, and how can academia and research institutions, which everyone on this panel comes from, help this process? Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I touched upon this a little bit during my previous answer, but I think that the policy in this context has, among many others, but two key roles. The first being the provision and alignment of incentives. That is to say that we have a complex constellation of actors, people in the first place, and then actors, institutional actors, who have different goals, respond to different incentives, and they have different capacities. And so the policy in the first place must be able to recognize all of this and understand which are the entry point to make these linkages exist and which are the barriers to these entry points. So I think the policy is exactly meant to overcome the barriers as its core goal and provide enabling conditions and leverage. So in terms of enabling condition, my second point that I want to talk about is skills and human capital. So we know that in the African continent, and in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, we have a very large and growing population with a very young median age. So we have a huge amount of people who are those who will be shaping the future of the continent in the coming decades. And for this potential to be exploited and for these innovations to happen, we need a policy that can unleash this human capital by means of providing education. So I think education is a key policy dimension in the first place before we talk about economic incentives and so forth, because we need people who can run companies, who have technical skills, who conduct research. So I think it's this is a key dimension I would like to stress on. Then, of course, yes, the policy has the role of identifying where these barriers, where are there some conflict in the incentives among actors, and how can some mechanisms deal with this?
I'd like to give you like an extra question. So would you also talk about ensuring innovations are generally adapted to the very diverse contexts on the African continent as you're answering your question?
Yes, thank you for the addition. And thank you for the answer. It was quite comprehensive. I don't have a lot to add, but I would like to bring an example, because we had this June in Bonn an IRENA Innovation Week, and we discussed a lot about sustainable development with renewables in Global South especially. And I want to bring a few examples that I think are relevant for this discussion. We had Brazil in this conference that brought the perspective and the importance of fostering comprehensive innovation ecosystems for self-reliance. What do they mean by that? They are also calling this active technological learning, and it's something that they have applied for the aviation industry, but it perfectly makes sense also for energy transition. And what is that? Instead of just relying on importing the technology from outside, it's also building very strong public institution and local capacities to understand the technology and to further develop that and adapt it to the needs and the culture and the challenges of the country and of the environment that the technology will be used. And then this technology could be further deployed and developed in a way that best adapt to the conditions, climatic condition of Africa, or in the case that was discussed a little bit before, or to be adapted also to, let's say, cultural customs, ancestral technologies, and ancestral knowledge. Also, there are a lot of cultural differences between different regions in the countries. In Brazil, it was the case that the north is very different than the south, and having a strong public institutions that has the capability and understanding of the technology and of the cultural context, it's critically important to develop and keep deploying these innovations and make them also have self-reliance and kind of this that we discussed before, sovereignty, and not depend always of what comes from outside. This answers a little bit. Thank you.
Is a comprehensive enough answer? I think I'll go to Sandro.
Thanks. Just very quickly, it's since I'm from the Commission, I think global gateway you mentioned, and you know, huge amount of financial resources we are talking about. The thing is, when we try to help, even you know, you are imposing certain structures on the beneficiaries, and I don't think it's very good. Africa needs any money. I mean, we can give even 3 times more. This will not be enough. But giving too much money for innovation project can also change the way you know, the recipient would innovate, and maybe they would innovate in a different way, maybe in a better way than we could do if we have a complementary project like the LEAP-RE. I really like it that, you know, the LEAP-RE project builds on really initiations from Africa and try to scale it up from there. And I think that's good. If we give 100 million for a project, we will end up grid extension, and I don't really like you know, this thing alone. There is a place you can do it. You have to do it different things at the same time. Well, I think that's why I think it's very timely, this conference. What we have is that we are a little bit preoccupied here in Europe with the ticket size. We want to help. We need to give more and more, but we also have to give in a way that, you know, meets the project requirements. If there is a small project that has a potential that, you know, would change everywhere in Africa, maybe we have to give a small amount of money, and then it will come from private investors, and that the Commission doesn't have to give this money, but it can go to public sector development. But so I think it's a good complement. We can go for the big project. I mean, the Commission will give this Team Europe initiative money. We will channel it through these big channels. Well, I think it would be very important to keep up you know, a LEAP-RE type of co-work between Europe and Africa, because this could have an even bigger potential in the innovation landscape.
Oh, thank you so much. I have an extra question for Ricardo. Can you also, as you're answering your question, talk a bit about the capacity building efforts that you are currently working on to train African policymakers and academics? Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. Also, because after the other 3, of course, there was nothing to say left. No, thank you is exactly the point that I would like to raise. Looking at the policies are very important, and I think coming from academia, of course, academia can be the tool that policy can use in order to, let's say, push this kind of innovation as well and to address. Anna was correctly saying how, with capacity building, with, let's say, capacity building that is not only towards, of course, let's say, students, being academia, or is more a sort of dissemination among colleagues. Recently, we started online, and then we will start in presence at Politecnico di Milano, one of the blended executive programs that are, let's say, a collaboration between, obviously, Africa, and in this case, Italy, is the Italian government working on that, where some colleagues, let's say, at Polimi will be 25 in this case, but there are more in other universities, are partially online and partially coming to Milan being part of these courses. Obviously, in Milan, it will be about energy modeling. We cannot obviously change too much the topic, but not only. Also impact and industrial ecology. So, and this is at Milano, but with the collaboration of other universities. We have Rome, Naples, Florence. What is the idea? The idea is that our colleagues from Africa that were already working with us, partially, there are some colleagues from Strathmore University as well, where the idea is to work together in order to improve the knowledge. The capacity building is about that of tools, methodologies, and in order to have more, let's say, tools to be applied at the local context, as Sandra was mentioning before, in order to obviously improve the local context. But this is part of the policies that I think we were talking about. And academia can be a way with the capacity building, of course, and then there are other ways. Another way, when we were talking about commercialization, I would like just to add this point. As academia, as university, obviously we are going to open source, but because we have a role, but the role of university is also to have, for example, spin-off. We have a way to enter in the market to help students, colleagues, and let's say the community to enter in the market through spin-off. We have the let's say accelerators, we call it in this way, obviously the hub for companies coming from the university. So the role of university is, from one side, capacity building, and these projects are, I think, very important and coming from the policy, I have to say. It's a good policy in this case, and but at the same time, giving the opportunity to enter in the market and as a private player. I mean, and you know very well what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes, I completely understand that. So I'll open the floor for questions in case anyone has any questions. So there's a question here and the question there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Christina Trois. I'm representing Stellenbosch University and also Team South Africa here. I have two questions. One as a director of the Center for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies at Stellenbosch University, so more overarching, and other as a LEAP-RE PI in one of the projects funded by LEAP-RE second round. The first one is to Ricardo, see, regarding the open source issue that of the previous questions. Once your model has been presented open source, who is responsible for keeping up with the database of that particular model? And are you worried that people may actually add all sorts of unreliable data going forward? That is one question. And then the second question is that I would really like to see through a platform, maybe it's a comment more than a question. I would really like to see on a platform like LEAP-RE or LEAP-SE, because I think it's also quite applicable. Something like a bottom-up approach. So the South African or African universities that already are grappling with the same issues like education and developing business models or developing you know, skills around the energy transition, that would come to Europe and develop projects to not projects, but develop masters or summer schools in a more south-north approach rather than vice versa. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll also take the other question, and then we can get the answers answered at the same time. So he's at the front.
Thank you for the panel. I'm Khalid Bouzian from Morocco. So we are involved in a project involving, of course, European countries like France and Romania. and from the South Morocco and South Africa. So it is involving, of course, different expertises from different countries, from different experts, and so on. And the one point I would like to raise is about the what are the tools and the mechanisms provided by the European Commissions to support intellectual properties. You have mentioned the spin-off. So are there any mechanisms to support? Because, you know, at one stage we do everything and we come up next to the prototype, and there is what we call death valley to go for the industry and so on. And one point is how the European, or are there any mechanisms or tools to support, for example, incubation, support intellectual properties, and so on. And this is one point, very, I think for us, important point, at least in this project, the partners in this project. Thank you.
I think that's more of a question of outside this panel, but it's okay. Sando can try and answer to an extent.
It's
Oh
for
yeah,
the next
the person with the spin-off.
But yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so but Sando can also try and answer, and I think Anissa can try and say something about something. Yeah, sorry.
Good luck. I start. Okay. Thank you. Regarding, yeah, this is a very good question. Thank you. Let's say in this way, unfortunately, when it's open source, in somehow everyone is responsible and no one, this means no one is responsible. But the mechanism usually is this one, since this kind of software are developed not only, for example, Setadisma, Setadisma was part of the development of MicroSpy. MicroSpy started before Setadisma, involving let's say mainly people outside from Polimi, but then was not working. We took it, now we changed completely, but it's not only Polimi obviously developing, but there is usually one partner, one university, for example, that is in charge. So it's open, GitHub, you can add, but you have a sort of master that is permitting to add the new parts only after there is a check. There is a check and there is a standard. In MicroSpy, for example, we created some tests. We are keep going in order to check if your module is respecting this test. This means at least your implementation is right. And then, of course, we have to check if, let's say, the equations are right, etc., etc. So the point is there is always someone that is in charge. And the idea is you spread the community as much as possible in order to create more contributions. And at some point, it can happen. It happened with many other software in the past, as we know, also in other topics, not only energy modeling, that at some point there is a change, let's say, of responsibility, in the sense that another university, another group is investing more, so is taking in charge it. But it's a good question. You always need the community being active. Otherwise, the risk is to have something that is not going to survive. But the idea to open more is helping to maintain this kind of, let's say, standard and active approach with, but it's not easy. Yeah, I agree. I can for the easy questions.
So intellectual property and patent and the management, how to protect it. It's a in Europe we have institutions. European Patent Office. We have also intellectual property rights that are defended in theory. But you know, when I was working in the Agency for Innovation, they had quite an ambivalent approach toward patenting and also intellectual property. They say that it's important to get on the market. Intellectual property can help you or can even be counterproductive. Sometimes competitors can, you know, be very tricky, you know, and then it's even can be, you know, harming your interest. Maybe we talk later about what your special interest in the intellectual property, but strangely enough, most stakeholders in the innovation, InnoEnergy, they were not really very interested in intellectual property, right? They said, we want to go very quickly to the market, and then we will see if we can get big market share before, you know, the competitors copy all or things. We are happy, because the other way around, maybe it's taking too much time. But I know that in fact, you know, IP and patents are very important measurement of innovation. And, you know, you can measure the, you know, how the ecosystem works by, you know, how many patents, how many new innovation to the society were introduced. But I don't know the former part of it, how important is it? How is driving, you know, the innovation? That's another question. Maybe we talk about it later, but I don't want to take too much of the time. Maybe the other panelists can help me.
I think what's maybe the question that he's raising is how important IP in terms of like going to market versus actually it being a useful tool for impact. And maybe that's a very open-ended question. So instead of, if you can answer any of the questions, that's okay, but you can also like give some closing remarks, unless there's another person with another question in the, no? Oh, okay. No more questions. Thank you. Sorry. So sorry, guys, but feel free to ask the questions to any of the panelists when you see them. So you can give just closing remarks on your part, and then Giacomo can also say something at the end. Just
Okay.
say, yeah.
Should I start? Very, very quickly. I was not able to answer your question, but this is mainly because in IRENA we have such a broad definition of innovation, because we think that for the energy transition to be successful, the technology is already there. This is not a burden anymore. We have the technology available. The challenge is somewhere else, and that's why we need to innovate in other aspects and to look at really what are the systemic shifts and paradigms that need to change in order to enable this solution to flourish and support the really sustainable development. Because also the energy transition in many countries is not for the sake of decarbonization or decreasing or reaching climate goals, like it's more in Europe, but it's really a big opportunity for sustainable development and for reaching their local development goals.
Okay, thank you. Giacomo?
I mean, just to second that, I think that the type of challenges we're looking at are not those that really require a breakthrough in technological innovation, but they do require a breakthrough in the other components of innovation. So the components that enable innovation to be translated into actual deployment of solutions. So I think the focus should be on innovation as a holistic or systemic concept that is not about advancing the state of technology necessarily, or coming up with a very granular solution to tackle a specific problem. This is of course important, but it's not there that the main hurdle to innovation in this context lies, in my opinion, but rather in the broader set of dimensions that concern innovation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, guys. And feel free to approach any of the panelists. I give you permission.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the moderation, and to each of you for these insights. So we now have a 20 minutes coffee break. Afterwards, we will have the last session precisely addressing what you were mentioning, market entry, replication, scale up, and so on. And before, we will have, if I'm not wrong, a group photo in the atrium. So we will follow Zara. Zara, say hello. We will follow Zara, and we will have the group photo, and we come back here at 5.
Sì, Marina, sì, sì, sì. Sì, perché è sostituito Serena. Ah, giusto. Sì, esatto. Abbiamo parlato su Teams forse, no? Qualche mail.
Perché c'è
Giusto?
più o meno in parallelo. Sì, però i primi due
Sì.
proprio e poi e sulla linea che ho portato nella mia nuova università io sono stata a Bosch, avevo l'università quindi non, in realtà mi occupavo di waste perché sono come ingegnere ambientale.
Sì, sì, sì.
So,
perché non ho provato in passato perché sono stati poi ammetto che non abbiamo mai avuto un contatto diretto per lavorare insieme.
Perché voi fate
Adesso sicuramente il gruppo di ricerca è Energy Modeling sì, infatti questo non
a parte dico anche la mia proposta.
grazie, io ammetto che non ho niente in questo momento, però no, partiamo perché...
Abbiamo contatto su LinkedIn, ma è difficilissimo trovare delle mail.
Lo so.
Allora faccio direttamente.
Io volevo scrivere
il WhatsApp se vuoi.
Esatto. Io direi...
And then of course you have the but you're based here in the base. So the fruit picture in 2 minutes. Okay. So yeah, but it's important my interest in right? Yeah, different. I mean, there's a different approach, not so much into innovation, they always say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I got you, right? Yeah. There's an order. I think you start and then like you have the let's see. I haven't seen your presentation. There's no presentation, right? I just prepared something during the speech. Some points, but let's see. Look at the presentation. I've been working on it. I think you know it's right. I should talk a lot. I ran out of you're working then yeah. You are trying to provide us that which yeah, and our yeah, we're trying like to get this startup to accompany the economy.
Yeah. Okay, so we're about to resume. So please come and have a seat. My name is Laurent Bauchereau. I'm with the European Commission, but currently based in Addis Ababa at the EU delegation to the African Union. And my job is to promote science innovation cooperation between the two continents. So I know quite a lot about LEAP-RE, but I was not here this morning. I just arrived because this is the Africa Week and we have a lot going on. Actually, I was 4 events today. This is the last one, so I don't need to rush out to go somewhere else. But the bad thing is I didn't listen to any of your discussions so far, but I heard that there were already a lot of good discussions relevant to the topic of this last session. So you've been talking about setting up those calls, joint calls, which is always challenging, but we are very actually happy that this is taking place because it's not just EU money, it's EU money which is leveraging also member states and also more importantly African funding. So it's not it's the balanced in the way it's designed and the priorities are jointly identified and we want to build equal partnerships. So you had a second session to discuss the knowledge creation through these various calls, and this last session is about moving those this knowledge to the market, market uptake, replication, scaling up. And I understand there was already quite a lot of discussion in the previous session on this. So for this session, we have 4 brilliant panelists that I will briefly introduce. They will all have their time. And we will not take questions during this first part because we only have 45 minutes. But at the end, I will give you the floor and you will have an opportunity to address questions to any of them. So our first speaker today is George Lamé. He works for LGI HERF. So you know very well about LGI because LGI is coordinating and preparing this event. George has been working on the various projects which have emerged from the previous co-funding calls and has developed a methodology to assess the market maturity. And that has led to the identification, I think, 12 projects particularly mature for market uptake. And one of these projects is actually represented on the panel, correct? Through LEAP-RE Bagley, right? So after presenting the methodology and the results, you will hear from one of those projects about obstacles, about opportunities, about best practice and lessons learned from bringing those results to the market. Then we will hear from Javier Barranza, a colleague from the Commission, the Director General for International Partnership, so sister DGs to DG Research and Innovation, which fund the very large global gateway program, which is about developing partnership, international partnership, and funding large investment, mainly focused on infrastructures. 5 big areas, one of them is energy. So we will hear about this program, we will hear some examples, and we will hear about the future opportunities also for the private sector partners, large companies, but also startup companies to participate in those. And then our last speaker, Tamoji Chatterjee, will be online, and he's from C for All, Sustainable Energy for All, and he will give us a more broader perspective about this issue of market uptake from their experience at the UN and giving example in Africa, but also from other part of the world, which are relevant to the discussion we will have. So this is the menu for the 45 minutes. So let me now give the floor to George, who will give the first presentation on the methodology for assessing market maturity of the project funded. So please.
Yes, just to clarify, there's no presentation. Just to say it's gonna be just talking with everyone. So hi everyone. So I'm George from LGI. I am glad to be here again. I know I've seen some faces before, so thank you very much for being here. What I wanted to talk about today is the process of the strategic assessment that we did for the LEAP-RE portfolio. So this is a task I've been involved in for the past 2 years, working at LGI and with colleagues from POES, from other institutions working on the LEAP-RE portfolio. So what we discovered during this assessment, I'm going to talk about the methodology briefly and then tell you some results we had and what we expect to do with those results, just to see how the research translates into the market and market adoption, market readiness, investment readiness, all of these aspects. So what we did is we had 2 aspects of the methodology. We had a 2-process methodology. So the first one was we sent out a survey to the entire LEAP-RE portfolio. So we had 31 projects. We had a response rate of 67%. So we had 21 projects of these 31 projects responded to our survey. The survey was made up of questions for technology readiness level, maturity assessment, investment readiness. So we basically wanted to see where those projects were at that time, if we could translate these prototypes, sort of say, into market and market attractiveness. So this was the first assessment we did. We had many criteria. We looked at many criteria. As I mentioned, we had the technology readiness level. We used the European Commission's technology TRL assessment method. So that was interesting to see how this transformed throughout the projects. We also looked at intellectual property. I've heard you were discussing in the panel before that IP is something very complicated, sort of say. It's an important aspect of every project to have intellectual property rights. So we also used this criteria. We also looked at the market readiness and attractiveness. What this means is if the market is ready to accept these technologies, because a prototype is not always enough, even if you have a functioning prototype, if there's no market demand, we need to have a sort of equilibrium between the market demand and the technology or the product we have. And we also looked at business modeling. So some projects had already business models in place, which which is very interesting to see because business modeling is sort of the step that comes afterwards in the project. Even if we have functioning prototypes, business modeling is sort of commercialization, so it comes afterwards. So this was the first part of the methodology. So we had 21 projects, as I mentioned, responded. And then the idea was to select mature projects out of these 21, because we cannot look at 21 projects because each project has certain needs, certain aspects. So what we did is the second phase of the methodology was in-depth interviews. So we contacted the 8 or 9 most mature projects based on these criteria, which I just mentioned. And then we had a list of 9 projects, which you can see outside on the screen. Now when we go outside, you can see the investment portfolio. We have the 9 projects being showcased. I'll give you some examples as well later on. But the idea of this interview was to really see, based on the criteria that I just mentioned, how can we support these projects? How can we present these projects to investors, potential collaborators? Because this is the idea of the end of the day. We want the LEAP-RE portfolio projects to sort of come out of the research and be translated into market ready projects. So this was the second stage. We identified 9 mature projects. I can give you examples. We have projects related to agriculture. We have projects related to water, energy. It's a diverse portfolio. So these projects were identified to be the most mature. We have my colleagues here will discuss more projects, and we can definitely talk about that later on for these projects. Just to finish, also what we discovered in this assessment is that innovation is not enough. Some projects are very innovative, but these projects need support. These projects need we'll discuss this with Leonard afterwards, but I mean, what we're trying to do is to have a sort of a venture builder startup studio to really assist and support these projects, because as I mentioned, some projects are very innovative, but they lack, let's say, the IP structure. They lack the structure, the people. They don't have a very structured personnel, talking about CEOs, someone to lead, to be commercially attractive to investors. Some projects lack that as well. So this is the idea where we're aiming at LGI and with our colleagues here in the LEAP-RE portfolio, and in the future, hopefully, to have a startup studio, a venture builder, to really support these projects, because this is what we found out. We had a lot of obstacles, sort of say, to really replicate these projects into the market. So we're aiming to have a startup, a venture builder that is there to support these projects from day one. As I said, we have very promising prototypes. The 8-9 mature projects you'll see on the board are very mature. They already have a business model in place. They already know what they need in terms of funds. They have successful prototypes. They already did some market assessments. So the idea is there. They just need more support, a venture building mechanism to help them be really replicated, or let's say launched into the market and translate everything we have research to be market ready and market acceptable, which is the idea of this portfolio, this promising portfolio of interesting projects within LEAP-RE. Sorry, I think I spoke a lot. I'm trying to summarize all this information, and don't hesitate, as Mr. Laurent mentioned, to come back to me if you have any more questions, if you'd like to hear more about this strategic assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So one of the selected projects is here with us on the panel. So Lotfi Bagli, you are the coordinator, I understand, from this project MG Farm, which is in the field of agriculture. So yeah, can you tell us how you got there and where you are in terms of bringing those results to the market, creating companies and jobs and so on?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So just I want to let you see what is also my career, because it has an impact on how building things. I'm a professor in electrical engineering, and I teaches and did research 10 years in France, 11 years in Algeria, and then 5 years in France. So I know both systems, how this work, and this helped me a lot to coordinate the project and to see from the inside, because I know how the system works in North Africa and in Europe. Our project is microgrid for farms, so it's smart microgrids for sustainable energy, and we have 11 partners. I will present tomorrow the result of our project, and we build pilot farms. So we have two kinds of pilot farms. Pilot farms that we build from scratch in a research center, near a research center, and also from a farm, an existing 200 hectares, 2 square kilometers, a farm, a big farm, and they have problems of watering, irrigation, and we help them to size the electrification of their system. And we have also other farms in Morocco as well. And another aspect of our project is that we have partners, they are German partners, that are not scientific people, so they are working on the socio-economic aspects of the project. So we have these studies of the economical models and the policies. So they study, and they said that the investing and making products from prototypes in Algeria, in Morocco, is very difficult. And also in the agricultural field, you need to convince by giving a strong, how to say, examples. So if you have a pilot farm, you can convince people, farmers, to say, okay, it works with this, look at this, and we can scale up or scale down. So this is why we have small farms and